Good evening, my viewers. This is George Ondek with the latest edition of Get On Deck with George. And I have the feature that comes up around election time every year, Greet the Candidates. And tonight I'm very honored to have Bob Castelli with me, who's a candidate in the
40th Senate District.
Which covers
most of the upper part of Westchester, lots of Putnam, and parts of Dutchess. It starts down in Mount Pleasant, goes through Westchester, Putnam, Cortland, Yorktown, Somers, Newcastle, Mount Pleasant, Pound Ridge, Lewisboro,
Wow.
up into North Salem, and then it goes into Carmel, and then up to Beekman, Paulding, Southeast, and Patterson.
quite a big district.
Big district,
And,
absolutely. Thank you
it
for having me.
borders where I am. I think you're in Peekskill too, right? Are you?
Yes, in Peekskill as well.
So I'm a constituent of yours as well.
That'll be great.
And one thing I do on my show, I'm very fair. I invite all the candidates to come on. So if your opponents want to come on the show, they're perfectly welcome. But I want to tell people, I know a little bit about you, Bob, and I know your background. Like me, you're a Vietnam veteran.
And thank you for your service.
Thank
Welcome
you
home.
for your service and welcome home. But people, you got to know what a self-made man Bob is. He was a high school dropout,
Yep.
got a GED diploma.
Dropped out to join the Army, enlisted to go, and volunteered to go to Vietnam.
After your service in Vietnam, you went to college.
I did.
You got your 4-year degree.
Got a 2-year degree and a 4-year degree, sir.
I got a 2-year degree and a 4-year degree thanks to the vocational rehabilitation GI Bill, because I came back as a disabled veteran from Vietnam.
Amen.
But you didn't stop there.
No, I actually, when I spent the next 22 years in the state police, and when I finished my state police career, I ended up going to graduate school at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard.
Wow.
So, it was a tremendous honor. And, I made a commitment to education, which I always believed. And, of course, after that, as you know, I got to work in 3 different colleges simultaneously. I was the chairman of criminal justice at Iona College in New Rochelle. I was also a professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice and at Marist College in Poughkeepsie. Simultaneously, I would start at 8 o'clock in the morning. I'd drive to New Rochelle, go to John Jay at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and drive up to Poughkeepsie to teach an 8 o'clock class at night.
Bob, you served 2 terms in the Assembly, I believe.
Yes, sir.
What has made you decide to run for this state Senate seat in Yorktown and is it Orange County and Putnam?
Westchester, Putnam, and Dutchess.
Okay.
The reason that I chose to run was because, first of all, I've spent my life involved in public service to my community, service to my country. I believe that was noble. It's what I wanted to do. I believe that's where my heart was always at. And what I saw when Greg Ball decided to vacate the seat, I saw the opportunity to serve a larger group of people and to actually get more done because, as you know, this particular seat is the pivotal seat for control of the New York State Senate. As you know, Democrats control both the governor's mansion as well as the Assembly. The Republicans control the Senate. And having a check and balance is a good thing. So this becomes a very critical seat for maintaining that check and balance. And because you'd be in the majority, I'd have a greater opportunity to be able to do things for people.
Now, from what I understand, the candidate that the state Republican committee or county Republican committee picked in only 3 days and really didn't give you a chance to get on the ballot, you're primarying the candidate who's on the ballot, or you're...
Yes, sir.
Explain that a little bit more to me.
Well, when Senator Ball decided to vacate the seat, he left on a Friday. He made that announcement, and they had a nominating convention on a Monday evening. Well, 3 days is certainly not enough time to vet a candidate. I've run for statewide office 4 times, and I've been both the Republican and Conservative Party nominee 4 out of 4 times, including the office holder 2 of those 4 times. So we had a nominating convention. Usually what happens is you have a vetting process. All the committees come together, they bring all the potential candidates in front of them, they interview them, and then the committees decide who they want to move forward with. Well, we didn't have that opportunity. I went into that convention on that Monday evening, 5 different towns, including my own, Lewisboro, North Salem, Pound Ridge, Newcastle, and the town of Mount Pleasant, their committees went in and said, look, we would like a postponement of this vote for 10 days in order for us to be able to bring all the candidates, myself, Terrence Murphy, anybody else who wanted to before them. That is the appropriate way to do that. Unfortunately, the chairman from the 4 towns here, Peekskill, Cortland, Somers, and Yorktown, carrying proxied votes, cast 10,000 more votes against that adjournment. And because of that, that forced the vote for the candidate that night. Well, of course, Terrence Murphy, who's the other candidate, was nominated by his town. I was nominated by mine. The same 4 chairmen cast 10,000 more weighted votes than the other towns combined. And of course, he became the nominee. So, as is my right, I chose to primary him to give the people their voice back.
To me, the people should have a choice, and if you want to run for that seat, it's more of a choice for the people if there's more than one candidate, especially since that candidate was picked so quickly by the party, it sounds
Well,
like.
exactly.
And we're talking about the Republican Party now.
Yes, the Republican Party.
It's a Republican primary. And when is this primary,
It's
Bob?
on Tuesday, September 9th. So, Senator Ball decided to endorse a friend of his, Terrence Murphy, and the party leaders up in Albany decided they wanted to pick their own candidate. My belief is the people choose the candidate.
I believe that as well.
Hence, I wanted to enter a primary to give them a choice.
Bob, what were some of your accomplishments when you were a state assemblyman? And you're the person in the race who has experience on the state level, being a ex-state assemblyman, I understand.
Yes. I had the honor of not only serving 4 years in the town board, which is what my opponent has done, but I also served 2 terms in the New York State Assembly. I cast a total of 3,400 votes, by the way, on important issues that affect us all, and of course I never missed a vote, which I'm very proud of. So, under the circumstances, not only did I not miss a vote, I didn't abstain from a vote. These are critical issues at the state level. Most people don't realize how much the state is involved in your life, but I was the ranking member on Veterans Affairs. I, like you, am a Vietnam veteran and a disabled veteran. It was my honor to serve the veterans community as the ranking member on the Veterans Affairs Committee. I put in 33 bills for veterans while I was there, which is the largest number of bills in the last 30 years that anyone put in to help veterans. I was also the ranking member on the Committee on the Aging.
So you care about senior citizens?
Absolutely, absolutely. You know what? They come from the greatest generation, that generation, my dad's generation, yours, saved the world for us once upon a time, and we owe them a debt of gratitude. We need to take care of them in their golden years. So I worked in the ranking member on aging, ranking member on the Veterans Affairs Committee, on the Health Committee, the Labor Committee, the Government Operations Committee, because obviously having been in the state police for 22 years, I had a knowledge of how state government worked, and also on the Election Law Committee, which I found to be fascinating, because how these elections work, as you know, is anyone's guess in most cases. I mean, as you know, right now, my opponent has chosen to challenge my Republican signatures. I could have done the same to him. It's part of the process. I chose not to try and disenfranchise our Republican voters. Unfortunately, we are up in court as we speak today, having those things challenged by the Senate lawyers working for the Murphy campaign.
Bob, are you on any other lines in case you were knocked off?
No, this was about being on the Republican line, and this is the Republican line.
And you've been a Republican all your life.
I have. I've been a Republican since Richard Nixon gave us the right to vote when we were 18 in Vietnam, and haven't missed an election yet.
How do you feel? I'm a fiscal conservative when it comes to government spending. How do you feel on government spending up in Albany?
Well, as you know, one of the things that I was proud to be able to do is I worked on creating the tax cap to rein in municipal and school spending. I thought that was very important. Many of our municipalities do a great job in Westchester and Putnam and Dutchess, but on a statewide basis, there's a lot of fiscal irresponsibility, and that tax cap was important to rein in that spending.
Yes.
Now, that was a 2-part program, tax cap and mandate relief. Unfortunately, we did not get the mandate relief. As you know, I was the assemblyman representing both the governor and the Clintons and most of the prominent Democrats, which is unusual because I'm a Republican in a Democratic district. So And I'd spoken to the governor about that, and I said, Governor, I said, you know, you indicated you would give us mandate relief, and he said, Bob, he said, we've done everything we could in the session, we're going to keep working on it. And I took him at his word. You know, we've had a good working relationship. I mean, there are things that he and I don't agree on, but the fact is, there are things most people don't agree on. I respect the man, and I've worked well with him, as I have with our county executive, Rob Astorino, who's a good friend, you know, who's in a contest with our governor as well.
On the state level, you were in the state assembly, which you were outnumbered 2-1, 100 Democrats to I think 50 Republicans.
50 Republicans, yes, sir.
Is it important for whoever holds this office to work with both parties, to get along with the other party? Because from what I understand, in Washington, it's very dysfunctional at times.
They don't even talk to each other, I'm told, which is disgraceful. I think
And almost put us on the brink of bankruptcy.
absolutely. You know, as you well know, at the end of the day, when you serve the public trust, we answer to you and to
Yes.
all the people who we serve. It is incumbent upon us to work with people across the aisle. When I got up there, I realized I would never get anything done if I didn't make friends with everyone on the other side of the aisle. So I set out to make friends with every one of the 100 Democrats, and I have to tell you, I did. And as a result of which, in a period that was less than 4 years, I managed to pass 6 pieces of legislation that I wrote and 37 pieces of legislation that I co-sponsored with Democrats, all of which were signed into law by the governor, 2 governors, Patterson as well as Cuomo. So I'm very proud of that record of bipartisanship. I think it's incumbent upon you to work with members of the opposition party. I mean, you don't always have to agree with each other, but you can disagree like ladies and gentlemen, and I think that is key. I come from a district that is more than 60% Democrats to less than 40% Republican, and yet I'm the only Republican to get elected there in 18 years. I got elected
Wow,
twice.
that's quite an accomplishment.
And thank you. And it is an honor to serve members of all parties. I would have stayed in office had it not been that they redrew my lines, which is politics as usual the last
They
time.
call that gerrymandering or
Exactly.
certain districts.
Exactly. You know, so look, I'm a big boy. I can take
What are
this.
some of the other issues that you're strong on, that you're for the people, that you want to talk about tonight?
Absolutely. Well, of course, you know, tax relief is one of the important things. Westchester pays the highest property tax in the United States of America.
Right.
And a lot of that is a result of these unfunded mandates, which Albany gives the state, you know, down from the state to the county and said, okay, we're going to give this to you in Yorktown or Peekskill or Somers, but we're not going to give you the money. We're just going to tell you got to do this.
Wow.
And that's
That
patently
seems
unfair.
so unfair.
Exactly. School aid, for instance, we get a disproportionately smaller amount of school aid than other counties like Nassau, for instance, because there are more high-ranking politicians there who can fight for them better. So while Nassau and Westchester, for instance, are 2 very compatible counties, dollar and cents-wise, Nassau gets much more school aid than Westchester does, and certainly is more than Putnam and Dutchess. So these are disproportionate things that are injustices that we want to correct. I have always been known as a reformer. Matter of fact, I was one of Ed Koch's heroes of reform for fighting for independent redistricting. The New York Times said that I was the kind of reformer Albany needed. I have been known to have enough backbone to stand up to the party bosses, my own and everybody else's, because at the end of the day, I work for you. I don't work for them.
The state Senate is very close with the Democrats and the Republicans.
It is.
That's
Yes,
why
sir.
this is one of the key races. I think when Mr. Ball won one time, that was the deciding vote, I believe.
And in the last
So
race, he
that's
only won
why-
by about a percentage point.
That's why it is so important for a Republican to win in this district also.
True.
But I'm wondering if your opponent, who I understand is a councilman in Yorktown, right now there's a 2-2 split. I think a Democrat and a conservative have teamed up against 2 Republicans. You know, it's very important for that Republican seat in Yorktown to stay Republican. And I wonder if he thought about that before he decided to run against this race, because that would vacate another Republican seat in Yorktown. I don't know if you want to discuss that,
Well,
Yorktown
I mean,
politics or not.
rather than getting into Yorktown politics of my opponent, the only thing I would say is this: he just got reelected to serve as a Yorktown councilman again.
And that's a 4-year term,
It's
right?
a 4-year term of office. He just did that in November. I mean, he needs to decide what he wants to do. If he wanted to be a town councilman, it's an honor to do that. I've done that for 4 years. That's great. But, you know, he got elected to one in November, and all of a sudden, you know, months later, he's looking to become the state senator here. I don't begrudge him the right to look for a higher office, but then, in the same token, he ran twice unsuccessfully for the county legislative seat. So if you're not going to win the next seat up, then winning the one that's two higher than that is going to be very hard.
And he doesn't have the experience you have on the state level dealing with
Truly.
Democrats as well
Yeah,
as
I'm a nice enough guy.
Republicans.
There's no question
Yeah, he's a
about
very
that, you know,
nice guy,
But
Mr.
the
Murphy.
fact is, yeah, I'm the only one that's held these statewide seats. So,
How are you on women's rights issues, Bob?
very strongly, very strongly. You know, I think at the end of the day, you know, women in many cases have been terribly discriminated in our society. Remember, it was less than 100 years ago that women couldn't vote in this country.
That's right.
And, you know, women's rights, women's health care issues are important issues. Equal pay for women. I voted 4 out of 5 times for equal pay for women. I would have voted 5 out of 5, except one of the bills was so badly constructed, no one in their right mind could vote for a bad bill. But at the end of the day, women should receive equal pay for equal work. And you know, I believe in protecting their rights.
Another issue, Second Amendment. How do you feel about the
You know,
Second Amendment?
I was always, I'm a firearms instructor. You know, I've been in the state police. I actually competed at the world and national level as a shooter.
Wow.
So I believe strongly in the protection of all our constitutional rights, including the Second Amendment. You know, it's, look, we know that there are people in this world who don't belong with firearms. There are people in this world who don't belong outside without being behind bars, too. But at the end of the day, I think it's a constitutional right you have to protect. And again, you know, we try to protect all those rights.
I'm for that too, except that I see the national NRA didn't even want to give in on background checks. I don't know if you want to discuss that tonight or not.
Well, you know, one of the things that we need to know in New York especially is we had, before the New York SAFE Act, we have the toughest gun laws in the country here. And of course, the most recent law, the New York SAFE Act, which I was not in favor of because I didn't think it's functional, didn't do any good, was done as a result of the terrible tragedy that took place in Connecticut.
Yes.
Well, let me put on my other hat as a criminal justice professor, because for 15 years I was a nationally known expert on the subject for ABC, CBS, NBC.
Wow.
From John Jay College, the New York Times, the New York News Post.
Very well respected criminal justice college.
I was. And, you know, look, 5 of my friends were killed in the line of duty when I was in the state police. Gun violence is a serious issue to me. And yet, I can tell you that no law would have prevented their killing, because those individuals were killed, not a one of them with either an assault weapon or a legally possessed handgun. So most of the gun crime we see is perpetrated by individuals who are criminals,
With illegal
perpetrating
guns.
them with illegal and or stolen guns. Now, I think what we need, instead of more laws, we need more law enforcement. I think we need mandatory sentencing for gun crimes. You commit a crime with a gun, you go to jail. No ifs, ands, or buts, no plea bargain, no slap on the wrist and walk away, you go to jail. But again, you balance that with an individual's rights versus the public's rights to be safe. And those are always dicey issues to deal with. You know, it's one of the other issues we're looking at in this election is Common Core.
Yes, so you want to bring up
As you know,
education.
I'm an educator. I've been a college professor for 15 years. When I was in the assembly, we had this race to the top money, and the federal government kind of held us out like a carrot on a string to us and said, well, we'll give you $700 million, but you got to have standards of excellence. Of course, as a teacher, I said, sure, I'm all for standards of excellence. We want to teach our kids to be the best students they can be and succeed. We want our teachers held to a high standard of excellence, okay? But they didn't have the standards set yet. So we all said, okay, we'll take the $700 million and we'll establish standards. Well, we didn't get to establish the standards. The federal government handed them to us, and it became Common Core. The concept of standards was great. what we got stunk. In order for us to do this properly, we need to repeal Common Core. We need to create another system that it was supposed to be, where parents, teachers, and other stakeholders, including you and I as taxpayers, have a say in making this an effective system. And I think that's one of the keys that, a lot of times in government, you'll see bills which are purported to do something very good. And if you don't pay attention to the bill, the way it's written, and you look at all the sides of the argument, what'll happen is, a legislator will, with acting in good faith, will put in a bill to correct some small problem or injustice. What they don't realize is they don't pay attention to the unintended consequences. Sometimes the law they pass creates a bigger problem than the one we just fixed. And this is where you really have to do the due diligence. And, as a legislator, this requires experience. As I said, I cast 3,400 votes on everything from child care issues to housing issues to the tax cap. We passed during my term, the largest middle-class tax break in the last decade. We did a multitude of things. We repealed the MTA payroll tax. I was a co-sponsor on that bill. I worked on the Governor's Economic Development Council to try and create jobs here in the Hudson Valley. So I'm proud of what we did, and yet there was so much more to do, which is why I want to go back.
Bob, there seems to be a lot of trouble with electric companies and storms. How are you on constituent services for serving the people with NIPA, with Con Edison, getting them more responsive and quicker to answer to the public to get their lights back on, let's say after a Hurricane Sandy? Were you involved in that?
I was involved in there up to my eyes. As a matter of fact, I had a chainsaw in the back of my car. I actually was out cutting limbs for people when I'd be driving around in town.
That's something.
But the reality is I was very involved with them. I used to speak to the vice presidents of both NYSEG and Con Ed once or twice a day during that storm. And what would happen is, as a matter of fact, I gave my cell phone out to constituents because they had no phone service. So some of them had, cell phones, but they didn't have hardline service.
Right.
And we had an area, for instance, down in Newcastle, which I represented as an assemblyman. I'll still represent if I'm fortunate enough to be a senator, where they were out of power for 10 days. That was outrageous.
Of course it is.
Part of the problem was, we had a number. We had a 100-year storm 3 times in a 4-year period. And part of the problem was, one of them, as you remember, was the October snowstorm. Well, the dynamic there was kind of the perfect storm. The first frost hadn't happened. The trees still had foliage on them.
It was around Halloween
and because
time.
the root ball was not frozen into the ground, but the foliage was there, when all of the snow hit, it stuck on the tree, and many of the trees came over. In my own town of Lewisboro, we had 76 out of 98 miles of roads closed at one time. In the town of Pound Ridge, we actually couldn't get ambulances in and out of the town.
How are you on big utilities cutting back on their union workers?
Well, that was
one
terrible.
of the biggest problems, and I know from in my own family that some of these big utilities are cutting back on their union workers, bringing people in during a storm like that from Texas or California or Canada.
California and Canada. Can you imagine
them?
I had this discussion with the people at NYSEG, and I got to tell you.
And some people call them rotten egg, not nice egg.
The crews that came down here from other places were fabulous. They came from all over the country, even from Canada, and as a result of which, did a fabulous job. I can't thank them enough, by the way, as well as the supervisors who were down here every day, and I was on the phone with constantly. The fact of the matter is, when NYSEG was bought out by the Spanish company, they, in order to increase their profitability, cut down their staffing tremendously and sold off some of their equipment. Well, what it did was, it was not able to allow them an effective emergency response. If everything is working well, they were great. When you had a disaster like we had in these 2 major superstorms, we saw what a nightmare that became. And, of course, we had public hearings over this. I called for a commission to investigate that. The governor actually did investigate it. There was a commission impaneled about that. I'm still not sure that this has been resolved to the extent that we need it to.
But something has to be done with public utilities and cutting down on staff, because in an emergency,
Absolutely.
they don't have the people
And
there.
remember,
So
as a public utility, they have a monopoly.
right.
If we're going to allow a monopoly to exist, which is against the Sherman Antitrust Act, as you know, then what we have to do is ensure that they have the proper staffing and equipment to deal with exigent circumstances so the public is served well in an emergency.
Let me ask you on another issue now. Youth of Westchester and the other counties you're with, are you for more youth programs, more senior programs too?
Absolutely, absolutely. First of all, you know, the seniors are our greatest asset in the nation. You and I owe them a debt of gratitude that the greatest generation had that we can never repay. And yet our youth are the future of this nation. If we do not educate them properly to the highest levels and give them as much opportunity as we can, we will have problems moving forward. And we won't be the greatest nation in the world, and we are the greatest nation. I want to stay that way. You know,
And we need youth programs to keep them away from, we
keep
didn't
them
get,
off
even
the
get
streets,
and
in
away
the
from
school,
drugs, which is
interested
becoming
in
a
doing
big
important
problem.
things like sports.
Community activities,
Exactly.
helping the community, making that a part of their program at school. Let's say a form of government volunteer service the last year
It's
of
an
school.
investment in our future, and it has to be done at the
Bob,
end
I
of
have
the day.
about 3 minutes left. Is there anything you want to say in wrapping up to my vast audience tonight?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for having me. It is an honor to be here. It is an honor to work with you as always. As a fellow Vietnam veteran, I thank you for your service, and as I say to all of us, welcome home.
And thank you again for your service and welcome home.
That's my
And
honor.
you're truly an American hero. You're to have come from less than a high school degree and to get a superior, what do you call that?
A graduate degree, Master's in
Graduate-
Public Administration from
and
Harvard.
to be a master's degree in Harvard in criminal justice, right? Was it
Yeah.
criminal justice?
But you know, at the end of the day, this election is about experience, and experience counts. We need people in office who are not picked by the party bosses. We need people in office who have the backbone to stand up to their own party bosses as well as the opposition and serve the people that sent them up there. At the end of the day, we the people decide. I would hope that they would decide that I'm the right man for the job. It has been a tremendous honor to serve.
Bob, when will the primary day be, and is it important for everybody to get out on primary day? I hear so many
Absolutely.
people say, oh, it's only primary, I don't vote in that, I only vote in the regular election.
The primary will determine who the Republican candidate for office is in the November election. Whichever one of us, myself or my opponent, loses that, they're out of the race, effectively. So it's imperative that Republican voters come out, show that the party of Lincoln is alive and well, you pick the candidate, and determine who it was that should represent you in the November election.
And that's nice you mentioned Lincoln, the party of Lincoln. In my hometown of Peekskill, John Tester, who is the county legislator, is the president of the Lincoln Society, and we're about to get a beautiful museum finished.
Excellent. And by the way, a good man and a good friend as well.
Yes, he is.
So
Very
I
good. Former
applaud
mayor
his
of
service.
Peekskill.
I applaud his
Mr.
service.
Bob Castelli, former
you, sir.
assemblyman, I thank you
Thank you.
once again on my show, and greet the candidates. Thanks again, Bob. Good luck in September and good luck in November.
Thank you, sir, for having me.
Thank you.